Periods 1, 4, 6. This is the Exponents practice test. I am going to work out each problem. It would be a good idea for you to actually have your practice test out. After I introduce the problem, I'll pause the video. You might want to do it again, see if you get a different answer, or you can just watch my explanation so you can figure out on ones you made mistakes on what you did. So on problem number 1, write using exponents. This is the kind of problem where your answer should have exponents in it, and I'm going to mark out as I go so I know what I've already used and what I haven't. So the answer to this problem is, I'm going to start with the 2's, and I have 3 of them. So I'm going to write 2 to the 3rd. And then if I look, I have 1, 3. So I'm going to write 3, or I can write 3 to the 1st. And then if I look at my 5's, I have 2 5's, so that's 5 squared. And then if I look at my x's, 1, 2 x's, so I'm going to do x squared. And my y's, I have 3 y's, so I'm going to write y cubed. And then what you got to remember is you don't forget that z, so times z to the 1st. So there's your answer. No, you do not multiply out the numbers. The answer is 2 cubed times 3 times 5 squared times x squared times y cubed times z to the 1st. Okay, problem number 2. We have 3 to the negative 2nd times 1 over 6 to the negative 2nd times 2 to the negative 3rd. So the way I taught you to do this was, I'm going to draw one fraction bar. Right now, if I were going to draw a fraction bar, it would look something like this. So I know what's on top and bottom. So 3 to the negative 2nd is on the top, so it needs to go to the bottom. So I have a positive. 1 over 6 to the negative 2nd. 6 to the negative 2nd is going to go to the top, so we have a positive exponent. 2 to the negative 3rd is going to go to the bottom, so we have a positive exponent. Okay, at this point, some of you make the mistake of multiplying out. I have told you what you need to do is play the game, but we don't have anything to play the game with, so we need to expand it. And then we need to see, can we simplify anything? Well, 3 goes into 6 twice, 3 goes into 6 twice. I can mark out 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here. At this point, I have nothing on top, which means I have a 1 and I have a 2 on the bottom. So my answer is 1/2, not 2, 1/2. I'm going to do both number 3 and 4 together right now. So number 3, this is a product rule problem. So if I look at this, I'm going to combine my a's. So if I have a to the 4th and a to the 5th, I add the exponents. So a to the 4 plus 5 is a to the 9th. And then if I take my b's and I combine them, 3 plus 2 is 5. So my answer is a to the 9th, b to the 5th. Number 4, this is a power to a power. So there's actually 2 ways I could do this problem. One way I could do it, which is using the power to a power rule, is I take my 2 powers and I multiply them. So that is 2 to the 6th. And then what I do is I would take 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So this is 4, this is 4, and this is 4. 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 is 64. So that's one way to get the answer. The other way to get the answer is I could have done 2 cubed is 8, and then 8 squared. 8 times 8 is 64. Either way works. All right, problem number 5. This is a product rule. So let's start with the variables first because I feel like that's the part we're the best at. So if I take x to the 8th and x, remember there's an imaginary 1 here, x to the 1st, x to the 8 plus 1, is x to the 9th. Then I'm going to do my y's. Y to the 6th, y to the 5th. Y to the 6th plus 5 is y to the 11th. And then I have to deal with my coefficients. Okay, so since 4 is the first coefficient and negative 5 is the second coefficient, and they're in parentheses next to each other and they're just numbers, we're going to multiply those. So the answer is negative 20 x to the 9th, y to the 11th. Okay, problem number 6. So we've got several things we need to do to this problem. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the coefficient. So the coefficients are negative 50 over negative 42. Now these are coefficients, not exponents, so we don't actually flip them. All we do is we try to simplify them. So first of all, two negatives make a positive. 50 and 42 are both divisible by 2, so 50 divided by 2 is 25. 42 divided by 2 is 21, so I've simplified my coefficients. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my negative exponents, flip them, and then everything else that doesn't have a negative exponent is going to stay where it's at. So my x to the negative 9th is going to go to the bottom and become positive. And then my x to the negative 6 is going to go to the top and become positive. Notice I'm marking them out as I go because I don't want to leave anything out. Let's talk about the y's now. Y to the 6 is going to stay where it's at. Y to the negative 7 second is on the bottom, so to make it positive it has to come to the top. And then if we look at our z's, and again I'm going to mark things out, if we look at our z's, z to the negative 4th is going to go the bottom, and z to the negative 10th is going to go the top. Okay, so if you notice, I've used everything, I've moved everything, now it's time to play the game. So if I look at this problem, 25 and 21 are going to stay the same. If you look at the x to the 6th, so my coefficients are going to stay where they're at. If I look at the x's, the bottom x wins by 3. This is where we play the game, so x to the 3rd is on the bottom. If you look at the y's, they're all on top, so they can't play the game. We just put them together, so y to the 8th. And then if you look at the z's, z to the 10th over z to the 4th, the top z wins by 6. So my final answer is 25 y to the 8th, z to the 6th, over 21x cubed. Okay, number 7. This is a power to a power. So let's start with the coefficients. We have negative 4 to the 3rd power. So what that's really saying is negative 4 raised to the 3rd power, which is negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. So this is 16 times negative 4. That's negative 64. So there's my coefficient. Okay, so now we need to look at the x. So the x really has a 1 on it, and we have to the 1, and then we have to the 3. So remember, power to a power, we multiply. 1 times 3 is 3, so x cubed. Now we got to do our y. We have y to the 7th times 3, y to the 21st, and then we have our z. So we have z to the 2 times 3, which is z to the 6. So my final answer is negative 64 x cubed, y to the 21st, z to the 6th. All right, number 8. So this is not a power to a power because look up here on number 7. Power to a power is something raised to a power. This is, they're just next to each other, so this is the product rule. What I would probably do first is I would go through and put my 1 on my x and 1 on my y so I don't forget. Okay, now let's talk about the coefficients. So this coefficient is negative 5/6. I'm going to write the coefficients down. This coefficient's negative 4. Now you got to be careful in this last parentheses. There's an imaginary -1. That negative does not go with the x, so -1. So all three of my coefficients, I am going to multiply them. So first things first, I can simplify. The 4 becomes a 2, the 6 becomes a 3, and that's the only thing I can simplify. So on top, my numbers are 5, 2, 1, so that gives me 10. And on the bottom, my number is 3. But now I got to look at the signs. So if you notice, I've got 3 negatives. Negative times negative is a positive, times a negative is a negative. So my coefficient is -10/3. Okay, now I'm ready to focus on the variables. So let's look at the x first. So the x to the first, x to the fifth, x to the fourth. So because this is a product rule, I'm going to take 1 plus 5 plus 4. So that's going to be x to the 10th. Now I'm going to look at my y's. Y to the 9th, y to the 1st, y to the 5th. So we have y to the 9 plus 1 plus 5. That is y to the 15th. So my final answer to this problem is -10/3 x to the 10th, y to the 15th. All right, number 9 is the longest one that we have on the practice test. So here we go. First thing we're going to do is we are going to draw a fraction bar, and we're going to put all of our negative exponents where they go, and our positives are going to stay where they're at. So 2 to the -4th is going to go to the bottom and become positive, and as I use them, I'm going to mark them out so I don't lose anything. And I can go anywhere I want. I can start wherever I want. So 4 squared is going to stay on the top because it's positive. This 9 to the first, I'm going to leave it on top. X to the 5th is going to stay on top. Y to the -6th has a negative exponent, so I'm going to put it on the bottom. Z to the -2nd has a negative exponent, so it's going to go to the bottom. On the bottom, I've got 3 to the 4th, so I'm going to put a 3 to the 4th down here. 2 squared is positive, so I'm going to leave it on the bottom. 4 to the -3rd is going to go to the top and become a +3. X to the 5th was on the bottom. It's positive. It's going to stay on the bottom. Y to the 9th is going to stay on the bottom. And lastly, Z to the 3rd is going to go to the top. Now, this is really confusing. You got to kind of find your things that are alike. So here we go. I am going to start with, it doesn't really matter, I'm going to start with my 2's. If you notice, I've got a 2 to the 4th and a 2 squared. They're all on the bottom, so that's 2 to the 6th. Okay, and then it doesn't really matter where I go next. I have a 3 to the 4th. I'm going to put it over here by the 2 to the 6th. Okay, then I have 4 squared and I have 4 to the 3rd. So they're all on top, so that's 4 to the 5th. The 9's all by itself, so I'm going to put it here. So now I've dealt with all my coefficients. So now I'm ready to look at my variables. So if I look at my x to the 5th here and my x to the 5th here, they're going to totally cancel out. So there's no x's in my answers. And if I look at my y's, here is a y, here is a y. They're all on the bottom, so I'm going to add them together. So that's y to the 15th. And then last but not least, if I look at my z's, here's z squared, z to the 3rd, the top wins by 1. Okay, so now, still not done. What I'm ready to do now is I am going to draw another fraction bar, and I'm ready to look and see what I'm going to do here. So I have no numbers that I can play the game with. I do know my answer has a z to the 1st on top and a y to the 15th on the bottom. And I'm going to expand the 4's, the 9, the 2's, I have to write small, 3, 4, 5, 6, And I have 4 threes. So 3, 3, 3, 3. Now I need to see what can I cancel out. So let's see here. I've got 2 2s, make a 4. 2 2s, make a 4. 2 2s, make a 4. 2 3s, make a 9. So it looks like to me the only numbers I have left are 2 4s and 2 3s. So 4 times 4 is 16. 3 times 3 is 9. Can't forget my variables. There's a z. And on the bottom, it's y to the 15th. So there's my final answer for number 9. All right, number 10. Okay, so number 10, this is a big power to a power because I have parentheses raised to a power. So let's start with the coefficient. So this technically says negative 2/3 to the third power, which means I have to take negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times negative 2/3. So 3 times 3 times 3 on the bottom is 27, and on the top, negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, times negative 2 is negative 8, so there's my coefficient. Okay, now let's look at the x's. I have x to the 6th raised to the third. And then last but not least, if I look at my z to the second to the third, I do 2 times 3, so that's z to the 6th. So my final answer is right here, negative 8/27, x to the 18th, y to the third, z to the 6th. All right, number 11. All right, so this is not a power to a power. It is 2 parentheses next to each other, so I know that's a product rule. I'm going to start with my coefficients. Here's 2 to the third and negative 8. So first thing we have to do is 2 to the third, which we know is 8, and then times negative 8. My coefficient's going to be negative 64. Okay, now I'm ready to use my x or my variables. So if I look at my x to the 4th and x to the imaginary 1, that's x to the 4 plus 1, because we add the exponent, so that's x to the 5th. Now we're going to look at our y's. So here's y to the 3rd, y to the 7th, so y to the 3 plus 7 is y to the 10th. And then lastly, there's an imaginary 1 on this z, and z to the 5th, so we have z to the 1 plus 5 is z to the 6th. So my answer is negative 64, x to the 5th, y to the 10th, z to the 6th. All right, here's number 12. So this is a power to a power because again we have a parentheses, we have a parentheses raised to a power. So we're going to start with our coefficient. So this really says what is 9 to the third power. So we have to take 9 times 9 times 9. This is 81. Times 9 is 729. So there's my coefficient. Okay, now we're going to start with our x. X to the 6th raised to the third is going to be x to the 6 times 3. That's x to the 18th. Now we're going to do our y's. Y to the 4th, 2 to the third is y to the 4 times 3. So that's y to the 12th. And then we have z to the 9th raised to the third power. So z to the 9 times 3 is z to the 27. So our final answer to number 12 is 729 x to the 18th, y to the 12th, z to the 27th. All right, number 13. So this is a product rule, parentheses and a parentheses, but we have negative exponents now. So these are one of the new ones. So let's start with the coefficient. We have 5 times 10, that's 50. Then let's look at our x's. So if we have x to the negative second and x to the... Okay, not quite sure where I stopped that at. So on the y's, we have 6 plus negative 2. So that's 4, because they're different signs you subtract. So we have y to the 4th. And then we have the z's. Z to the negative 9th, z to the negative 14th, negative 9 plus negative 4, they're all negative, so that's z to the negative 13th. Now, that answer is not correct. And if you're saying, why is it not? Well, because we have a negative exponent. You can never have a negative exponent. So therefore, we need to figure out what to do. So the 50 stays on top. The x to the first stays on top. The y to the fourth stays on top. To get rid of my negative exponent, I have to put it on the bottom of the fraction. Now there's my answer. I have no negative exponents. Okay, number 14 is a long one. So here we go. Let's start with the coefficients. So we have negative 2/3, negative 6, negative 4. So I'm going to take negative 2/3 times negative 6 times negative 4. I'm going to put these over 1 to make them fractions. 3 goes into 6 twice. So what I have is negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, times negative 4 is negative 16. Now I'm ready to start dealing with my exponents. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 1 on my x here so that I don't forget it's got a 1. So let's start with the x's. So x to the first and x to the negative third. If I take 1 plus negative 3, that's negative 2. So that gives me x to the negative 2. Okay, let's do the y's. We have y to the negative 6th. Oops, let's go back. Sorry, let's go back to the x's. I apologize. I totally forgot this one over here. So let's go back to this. And we had 1 plus negative 3 is negative 2, plus 7 is 5. I apologize. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to erase this and make it a 5. So here's what I did again. I did 1 plus negative 3 is negative 2 plus 7 is 5 on the x's. Sorry about that. Now I'm going to look at my y's. Y to the negative 6th, y to the second, y to the fourth. So if I take negative 6 plus 2 plus 4, well, negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0. So I have y to the 0. And then I need to do my z's. So I have z to the negative 9th, z to the 14th, z to the negative 3rd. So if I take negative 9 plus 14 plus negative 3, negative 9 plus 14 is 5. 5 plus negative 3 is 2. So I have z to the second. Now, this answer almost looks like it's okay, but right here, I don't need to put a y to the 0. That just means 1. So the final answer to this problem that I want to see is negative 16, x to the 5th, z to the second. You don't even put y in your answer. All right, last problem, number 15. Okay, let's focus on our coefficients first. We have negative 1/2 and negative 1/4. So if I take negative 1/2 times negative 1/4, that is negative times negative is a positive, that's 1/8. So my coefficient's 1/8. I'm going to go through and I'm going to put a 1 on my y here that doesn't have anything. I'm going to focus on my x's, so x to the 4th and x to the negative 9th. So this is 4 plus negative 9, which is negative 5. So in my answer, I need to have an x to the negative 5th. All right, I'm ready to do the y's. So I have y to the first, y to the fourth. So y to the 1 plus 4 is y to the 5th. So there's my answer so far. And now I have to do my z's. So z to the 6th is z to the negative 10th. So if I take 6 plus negative 10, that's negative 4. Okay, so here's what I have so far for my answer. The problem with that is I have negative exponents, which I can't have. Now, what was confusing for people was everybody seemed to know that x to the 5th went to the bottom, y to the 5th stayed on top, and z to the 4th went on the bottom, but I had people that didn't know what to do with this 1/8. Some people tried to put the 1/8 here. Well, that's a fraction in a fraction. We can't have that. So that's not where it goes. See, this is already a fraction. If you look back at the original answer, This is already a fraction, so the 1 is the numerator, the 8's the denominator, so all we're going to do is we're going to put our 8 in the denominator and we can put a 1 on top. There's my final answer. Okay, so this ends the practice test, going over the answers. Hopefully this is going to help you get ready for the test on Monday. Have a good day.